So today's Daf Yomi is Yevamos Chuf Yod Beis. So we're going to start with the Mishnah on Kuf Yod Aleph from a Beis. The Mishnah says Yavam Katan Sheba Al Yevama Katana. If you have a minor boy who does Yibam with a minor girl, Yigdalu Zemzeh, then they will grow older together. Meaning to say, he can't divorce her until he gets to be an adult. Rashi says because a minor is not able to give a get. But let's say the minor has Yibam with an adult woman, Tigad Lenu, then he should grow up with her. And Hayavama Sha'amar Betoch Shloshim Yom Monavalti, and the Yevama, if she says within 30 days after her brother-in-law did Yibam with her, she says we never actually had Bia together, then we force him to do Chalitza with her, because he hasn't consummated the Bia. But after 30 days, then we make a request from him. We just ask him to do Chalitza with her because we can't force him, because we don't believe her after 30 days. But if he admits that he actually never consummated, then and even after 12 months, even if it would be after 12 months, we force him to do Chalitza with her. Let's say a woman has taken an oath while she's still married to her husband, that she's not going to have any benefit from her husband's brother, from her Yavam, then then we force him, then after her husband dies, we force him to Chalitza, because she's not allowed to remain married to him. But if she takes the oath after her husband died, in which case she clearly takes the oath because she doesn't want to be married to him, or that's the implication, but it was the oath was made after her husband had already died and she had fallen to Yibam, then the vakshin and then we just request he does so we can't force it. But if it was clearly her intent that she was anticipating a Yibam relationship, and that's why she took the oath, I feel and even if it was while her husband was still alive, then we can't force the Yibam, so we just can ask him to do the Chalitza. So the Gemara says, Lema mas nisin below Rabbi Meir. Let's say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Meir, because what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah had stated that a minor the two minors, the Yavam and Yevama, that the halacha that they stated that they are allowed to do even with each other must not be like Rabbi Meir, because what does Rabbi Meir say? The time we went to the Brisa, Meir says a minor is not able to do Chalitza or Yibam. So our Mishnah, which clearly says they can, must not be like Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara says no. I feel with Rabbi Meir. It's possible it's even like Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said it's halacha with respect to Gadol, Katan, the Katan, Gadol. The Chaminah Biadi Sirahu. That Rabbi Meir said his halacha with respect to where one of them was a minor, one of them was an adult. And we're concerned that the minor will be not able to do Yibam when they get older because of the physical traits that they won't have. And so therefore, we're going to prohibit Yibam because they might be what's called Pogea Be'erva, having a prohibited relationship. The two minors that they're both the same, they're both minors, they're both basically not in violation, well, then we're not going to be prohibited. He didn't say his law. Where it says Vakatani, but didn't the Mishnah say Ba Yevama Gidola Tigadolenu? But don't we say that even if it's a minor boy with an adult woman, then that is Yibam, and we don't force them to separate. So Amar Rabbi Chanina Chuzah Ba Shani. Well, in that case, he already had the relations. Once he already had the relations with the adult, then we're going to say that it takes effect. The Gemara says, "What to get Leno Kamar?" but doesn't say that they can remain together, which means it's called biobia disurahu, that they're allowed to continue to have relations together, and it's always going to be, and according to Rebbe Meir, it's prohibited. So it must be our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Meir, because Rebbe Meir says a minor cannot do yibum or chalitza. Gemara says Kari Khan, but we have another question. It says here about this verse about Yibum, Hakim Lachem Shem. That what's the purpose of Yibum? To establish a name for your brother. But this boy, he's a minor, so he can't establish a name for his brother. He's not able to have children yet. So Amar Abaye, Amar Kra, there's another verse. The verse says Yivama Yiva'aleha Koldahu. Means to say that any Yibum, even if he's not capable yet of having children, he's able to do Yibum. Rava Amar Boav Hachinami Lamatzis Amis. Rava says even without that verse, we wouldn't say that a minor is prohibited. It's not possible that now he's prohibited to her, but after a while he becomes permitted. Is that really possible? It can't be that that's the case. Anyone, any Yevama, any man who when she falls to Yibum with him, he's not allowed to consummate it, then it should be something that is like your brother's wife who has children already. If your husband had children and you're prohibited to him. So therefore, since it's not possible, we don't need that verse. The verse says, maybe that is what it's telling us, that if he's a minor, he's prohibited to you if he falls to you as a minor, if you fault him as a minor. The verse says, no, Amar Kra, ki yishvu achem yachdav afilu ben yom echad. The verse states when the brothers dwell together, even if he's a one-day-old baby, then she falls to him in Yibum. She has to wait for him to become an adult to do Yibum or Chalitza, but still, except for, according to the Meir, she'd have to wait for him to become an adult. But still, that's the circumstance that we don't say that she's disqualified from Yibum if he's a minor at the time. Mara says, Yevama Shamar b'toch shoshim yom, Mantana da'ad. So Yevama who said within 30 days, she said she never had relations. We forced him to do chalitza with her. Mantana da'ad tvasim yom mukim anashi. So we say within 30 days, we believe her that he has not consummated. So who's the opinion that says within 30 days, a person is able to withhold himself from having the relations? So who is such a person? I'm Rabbi Yochanan or Mary. It's the same Rabbi Meir. We learned in a brayso, and this relates to Mesachas Ksubos, that when a man gets married to a woman and they establish a ksuba price, the amount of money that the bond that he's going to give her when the marriage terminates, if he terminates the marriage, either through death or his divorce, then that amount is dependent upon her being a virgin. It's a certain amount, and if she's not a virgin, it's a lesser amount as a baseline. But we see from here that if there's a tanas pasulim, let's say she has a claim of virginity, then kol shloshim yom, the claim of the virginity is lasts for 30 days. It means say that you could claim she's not a virgin, but you only have up to 30 days to make that claim. The first 30 days of marriage, but after that, we're not going to believe him because we assume that he's already had relations with her, and that's why she's not a virgin. Rabbi Yossi Omer Nistera, that if you do yichud together, if you have seclusion, which is our practice nowadays, then la'alter, then you have to make the claim immediately, or else you can't make the claim. Lo Nistera, but if you don't make the claim immediately, if you didn't seclude, then even after several years, if you never secluded, you can make the claim that she wasn't a virgin. Rabba Amar Afilu Tema Rabbi Yossi. Rabba says no. You can even say our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yossi. Ad Kanal Kama Rabbi Yossi Asam. Rabbi Yossi says it's claimed by the Tanas Besulam Barus also, by his betrothed wife, the Gispa, because we assume that they would have had Bia right away because he's familiar with her. But your brother's wife, Mivzav, it says the Gemara, Mivzav's buzzes meaning on top of Kufya Bezim and Alf. He's ashamed from her, and so we can understand why he would not have had Bia with her even longer than 30 days, according to even up to 30 days, according to Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says that if that's the case, if it's within 30 days and she says we never had bia, we force him to do chalitza. So the Gemara says, Ad shekofano so lachot, we force him to do chalitza. So the Gemara says, Ad shekofano so lachot, nechfeno yabim. Why do we force him to do chalitza? Force him to yibam. The mitzvah is the yibam. So Amarav, b'shagita yotze mitachas yada. No, she has a get in her hand. He gave her a get, and so therefore she can no longer do yibam with him. So we force him to do the chalitza. So meisvei, but we can't challenge this idea. So what it says in the Brisa, Yevamos shamar b'toch shloshim yom lo nivalti. Let's say the Yevamos says within 30 days we never had bia. Kofano so sheyichotzla, and we force him to do the chalitza. Achar shloshim yom. If it was after 30 days, nevak shnei menu sheyichotzla. Then we just can ask him to do the chalitza. He omeres nivalti v'hu omeres lo ba'alti. He says. She says we had bia, and he says he omeres nivalti v'hu omer lo ba'alti. She says I had bia, and he says I didn't. Arei ze yotzi beget. She says I had bia, and he says I didn't. Then we, if she says we have bia and he says no, we didn't have bia, then he has to divorce her with a get. Umer ba'alti, he says we had bia, but he omer es lo nevalti, but she says we didn't. And av pisha chazar va'amar lo ba'alti, and even though he comes back and says we didn't have bia, get the chalitza. So under those circumstances, if he says we have bia and she says we didn't, then even though he comes back and says actually we didn't, she requires a get and a chalitza. So we see from this case. So we see from this case, from the third case of this brisa where he says that we had bia and she says we didn't, then even though he comes back and says we didn't, she needs a get and a chalitza. So we see from that third case that she requires a get. And if we require him to give a get, that's a proof that their claims were without a get in her hand. Because if she had a get in her hand, why would we require her to give a get? So how can you say that that we're talking about a circumstance where she has the get in her hand? So that's the question against Rav's answer. So I'm a Rabbi Ami. No, what we have to change it. That's saying no. With her get, we also require a chalitza. That's what Rav Ami explains that brisa. Rav Ashi says no. Awesome get was ikaso. Achal get would be awesome. No, the first case that so Rav Ashi says a brisa is talking about where she has a get, but we had an additional get. The first get that she had, that was a rabbinic get that he gave her a get when they had this Yibam relationship, a Zika, without him having had relations with her, and so therefore she became disqualified, not enough to be divorced, but she became disqualified for Yibam. That's why we forced him to Chalitza and not Yibam. And here is the get for the Bia for a full marriage. So the Gemara says there was a circumstance where Hanu Shnei Modim. There was these two people who came before. They came to the court and they both admitted that they never consummated. They never had bia even though they said that they were going to do yibum. So Amru Rava chalutzu v'sharu atik. Rava says do the chalitza and you're done with this matter. So Amru Rav Shabio Rava v'atanya tzricha get v'chalitza. But then we say that under these circumstances she requires a get with the chalitza. How could you say she only requires the chalitza? So I'm away, Tanya. He says, well, if that's the brisa, that's the brisa. So what about the co-wife under these circumstances? That's the question that's brought. Meaning to say, if a woman claims we were married together and we had yibam, but we never had bia, is the co-wife going to be prohibited? So he said, meaning to say, does the co-wife say, do we say the co-wife is prohibited until she does even chalitza? So the Gemara says, the Asar Tzara. Well, because she's going to prohibit herself, and so therefore we force him or ask him to do chalitza. How are we going to say that this applies to the co-wife? The co-wife's already a different legal status by that point, because we say this concept of shavia le'achaticha d'isura, that shavia shaviso enavsha chaticha d'isura. She considers herself prohibited. You can't force it upon a third party. So we're not going to say, oh, she cannot do anything under those circumstances. The co-wife. So now we have learned in the Mishnah that if she takes a vow against herself while her husband is alive, then we force him to do the chalitza. That's what our Mishnah had said. So now we go back. The Gemara is going to say, Tanan Hasan, we learned in the Mishnah in Dharam, Barishona, how you omrim. At first, they used to say that shalosh nashim yotos minoslos kesuva. That three women leave a marriage, that we force the husband to divorce her, and yet she also, even though we force him to divorce her, she's able to kwei merksuba. Haomeres tamei ani lacha. If she says, I am tamei to you, so Rashi explains that this is talking about a woman who was married to a Kohen, and she says she was sexually assaulted, so he has to divorce her and on the basis of her claim, but she's allowed to take her ksuba because she didn't do anything wrong. Or if she says, she says, heaven is between me and you, meaning to say you're not able to perform in the bedroom. So therefore we say again, we force him to divorce her and to give her ksuba. Or if she takes the oath that she's not allowed to be with any Jew, she's not allowed to have relations with any Jew, which is an indication that sexual intercourse is very hard for her and painful. So in all these cases, we tell him to divorce her and give her a ksuba. Chazru Amar, but then they changed their mind and there was developments and they said, we're worried. Maybe she's just using this as a technique to impel a divorce and to get her monetary payment. So instead, if she says she's tamei, tavi raya l'dvar, she has to bring a proof. She says he's not able to perform in the bedroom. We ask him to do. We request from him that he does better. And if he says I'm unable. She says, I take an oath that I can't be with any Jew. Then he can annul his part of the vow, and he's allowed to be with her, and she's not allowed to be with anybody else. So the Gemara says, but now we have the question. Let's say she took this oath, I'm not allowed to be with the other Jews. So, and then the husband annuls the vow. Well, is he allowed to be? Is she going to be allowed to be with her yavam after her husband dies? Do we say do we say she had in mind that her husband was going to die, and so therefore, and she was going to fall before the yavam, and so therefore for this reason, she's also prohibiting herself to him, and even though the husband annuls the vow, he only annuls his vow. He doesn't annul the vow as it relates to the brother-in-law, and so therefore she's now prohibited to be with the brother-in-law. He has to take a chalitza with her. Or do we say, or do we not say that? Say he didn't have him, or do we say this wasn't at all her intent, and so therefore she didn't have intent to prohibit her brother-in-law, therefore she's allowed to do Yibam. So Rav says Yavam Eino Kabal. Rav says the Yavam is not like the husband, and so therefore he wouldn't have needed to annul her vow because she made this vow with her husband in mind, and so therefore he needed to annul her vow. But the brother-in-law, she's allowed to be with even without it being annulled. Whereas Shmuel Amar Yavam Hareu Kabal. Shmuel says the Yavam is like the Baal, and so therefore he should have annulled the vow, but since he didn't annul the vow, she's not allowed to be with him and requires chalitza. So the Gemara says, Amar Abai Kavasi de Rav Mistabra. Let's say the law is like Rav. We force him to do chalitza if she takes the vow against her husband, its brother, while her husband is still alive. And if you want to say that she had him in mind from the beginning, like Shmuel said, well, if that's the case, mivakshin, we wouldn't force him, we would have just requested mivakshin me by a way. We would have just been able to request him to do chalitza. We wouldn't have been able to force him. So the Gemara says in Hachamaya, that's not necessarily the case. Because here, what are we talking about? Who's the one who took the vow in the Mishnah? And so therefore, for that reason, we force him to do chalitza. Sheish labanim, because she already has children from her husband at that point, and they died only after the vow. Because she never would have anticipated that she would fall to Yibam. But if she has no children, then indeed the law would be mevakshin, that we would just request from him to do chalitza. We wouldn't force it. Well, if that's the case, says the Gemara, then the Mishnah, the Tanaim niskabnu lekach afilu b'chayei ba'al mevakshin mimenu sheich. Then why does the cases which they draw the distinction in the Mishnah? Why is that the case where if you have intent, then we can't? If she had intent to prohibit the husband, then we don't force him to do the chalitza. We just ask. If that's the case, they could have drawn a different distinction. When do we say we force him to do the chalitza? When she has children. But if she has no children, we just request it out. We say whether or not he had children or not, we force him to do the chalitza, and this is accordance with Rav that she didn't have him in mind when she made the vow. And Hadranalach Beis Shammai, we have completed this beautiful chapter called Beis Shammai, and now we start the next chapter of the Talmud. And this Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the Talmud, is basically the same. We quoted the vast majority of this Mishnah when we on the Daf Yomi on Shabbos. The Gemara already cited it, so we know that we say cheresh shenasa pikeches. So if there's a deaf mute who marries a pikeches, and cheresh is a deaf mute. In the time of the Talmud, we didn't think they were of sound mind, so they weren't able to do biblical marriage, and they were also not able to do chalitza because they weren't able to speak. And pikeches is a person of sound mind, a woman of sound mind. And a cheresh and a chereshes are the deaf mutes, and the pikeches and the pikech are the men and the woman of sound mind. So cheresh and pikeches. So if the male cheresh marries the pikeches, or if the male marries the chareshes, they're allowed to divorce each other because it's the same way they married, they could divorce. If they want to remain together, they're able to remain together. It's a chiddush. Why do we mean? Of course, they're allowed to remain together. Of course, you can. Well, Tosfos explains that just because they wrote they can divorce, they also say they could stay together. Just like he's able to marry her with hand motions, so too he could divorce her with hand motions. But let's say there's a pikech who marries pikechas, and then in the middle she became a charashas. He could divorce her or he can remain with her. But nishtatis, but if she became insane, well, yotzi, he's not allowed to divorce her anymore if she becomes insane in the middle. That's the Gemara is going to explain why you're not allowed to divorce a woman who's no longer of sound mind. Let's say he became a cheresh or he became insane. He's not able to divorce her since he's not of sound mind. You need to be of sound mind in order to be able to effectuate the divorce. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri b'nei Ma Isha shenischarsha yotza va'ish shenischaresh eino motzi. Why is it the case? It says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that a woman who became a nischarsha, she became a chareshes, you can divorce her, but the man who became a cheresh, why is he not allowed to do a divorce? Amaro eino doma. They said it's not comparable. Ish hamagarish leisha. Ha'isha magarish leisha misgareshes. You can't compare a man who divorces to a woman who is divorced. Isha yotza or tzona. Woman can be divorced willingly or against her will. Rabbeinu Gershom he lived from 940 to 1000. He lived in the 10th century. So Rabbeinu Gershom said, it made a takana that you can't divorce a woman against her will. By the time of the Mishnah, that's a distinction. That Isha Yotza or Tzona, Vashalo or Tzona. She could be divorced wrongly or against her will. But the man, he's only allowed to divorce willingly, so he needs to have intent. Hey, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada al Chareshes. Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada testified about a Chareshes. Elsewhere, we know that Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada himself had children who themselves were Chareshes. So let's see if they put this here in the footnote. I don't see it. But he has his own. He had his own children who were Chareshas. And then in the end, they became well, and it turned out that they knew the halachos the whole time. That's the Gemara in Yerushalmi. Anyway, hey, Rabbi Yochanan Gudgada Chareshas, he testified about a Chareshas whose father had married her off, which she's allowed to do. That she leaves the marriage through a divorce. Amrulo, so they said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, so the rabbis responded to him. They said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada testified, that since we see that if a woman is biblically married, her husband can divorce her even if she has no intelligence. Avzu, even if she was betrothed when she was bikechas, and so therefore it's a biblical marriage, and after she became betrothed, she became insane, kayotziba, that if she became charashas, you could divorce her. Just like you could divorce a girl who was married off by her father, so too you could divorce a woman who became charashas after she get married. Beis achen charash, and so now we have these cases that we had discussed on Shabbos. Beis achen charash, and let's say you have two brothers who are charashin, nisuim and beis achayos charashos. They're married to two sisters who are charashos. O shtei achayos pikuchos, or two sisters who are pikachos. O shtei achayos achas charashos achas pikachas, or two sisters, one's charashos, one's pikachas. O shtei achayos charashos, or two sisters who are charashos, nisuos l'shnei achen pikchen, are married to two brothers who are pikchen. O l'shnei achen charashos, or two brothers who are charashos. O l'shnei achen echad cheresh ve'echad pikeach. In all of these cases, they're all going to be exempt from chalitza and yibam. And what's the reasoning? The reasoning is because they are the wife of the sister, and we know that you're not allowed to marry two sisters. But let's say they were not related, then he should do yibam, and he should do yibam under those circumstances if they were not related, and then afterwards he could divorce her. Let's say I have two brothers, one's cherish, one's pikech. And they're married to two sisters. Pikachos, so these two brothers, one's cherish, one's pikech. They're married to two sisters, one's pikachos. Meis cherish bal pikech. So now let's go through the circumstances. Let's say the cherish dies. Mayasa pikech bal pikech. So what should the pikech brother do? Teitze mishum achos isha. Then since his brother was married to a sister, she's divorced because she doesn't even do yibum or chalitza because she's the sister of his wife. But let's say meis pikech bal pikechas. Let's say pikech dies. Now mayas acherish bal pikechas. Now the cherish is only married rabbinically to his wife. So now, but his wife now falls biblically in yibum to his brother, because he died. So she falls biblically speaking yibum to his brother. So what does the brother have to do? Motzi ishta beget. He has to. So what could he do? He can't, under these circumstances. So let's just say this case again. So you have two brothers, one is cherish, one is pikach. They're married to two sisters who are pikachos. So meis cherish ba'al pikachas. So if the cherish dies, maya se pikach ba'al pikachas. So what should the pikach do? Teitze mishum achos isha. So then, under those circumstances, his brother's wife is divorced. It doesn't even get married because it doesn't even fall yibum or chalitza because she's the sister. But meis pikeach para pikachas. But let's say the pikeach who's married to the pikachas dies, then what do we do? Maya se cheresh para pikachas. So what can the cheresh do? So the cheresh para pikachas, what does he do? So moti ishto beget. So he divorces his wife through a get. And then because she's the wife of, she's a sister of a woman who falls to him in Yibam, but but he's still not allowed to marry his brother's wife because she's the achos isha, but he's not certain that he's really married to her sister because he was a cheresh. He can't, and he also can't do chalitza because he can't say the words lo chafat stil kafka. I can't speak because he's a cheresh, and so that's the problem. So Shnei Achim Pikrin, let's say you have two brothers who are Samai, Nesuim Shtei Achios, and they're married to two sisters. Achas Chareshas Achas Pikechas, and one is a Chareshas and one's a Pikechas. Meis Pikech Bal Chareshas. So if the husband of the Chareshas dies, Maya Seh Pikech Bal Pikechas. So then what does the Pikech husband do? Teitzim Mishim Achos Isha. He says, well, you're my wife. He says to the Chareshas woman, I don't have Yibam or Chalitza with you because you're my wife's sister. But Meis Pikech Bal Pikechas, but let's say the Pikech dies, well then Maya Seh Pikech Bal Chareshas. So one is the one who's married to the Chareshas do, Motias Ishto Beget. Then he divorces the Chareshas with a get. There's Ishes Achav Bechalitza, and so now he can do Chalitza with his brother's wife, but he can't marry her because he was rabbinically married to her sister. Shnei Achin, but let's say you have two brothers. Let's say you have two brothers, one's a cheresh, one's a pikech, and they're married to two sisters. They're married to two sisters, one's a chereshes and one's a pikechas. So then, under those circumstances, so again, we have two brothers, one's a cheresh and one's a pikech, and they're married to two sisters, one's a chereshes and one's a pikechas. Meis cheresh bal chereshes, and the cheresh who's married to the chereshes dies. Maya se pikech bal pikechas. Well, then he's married. Then his sister falls to him, and his wife's sister falls to him. Of course, he doesn't do even more chalitza with her. But meis pikech bal pikechas. But let's say the pikech is one who dies. Maya se cheresh bal chereshes. So then what does the cheresh do? Motias ishto beget. He divorces his wife because he's allowed to divorce her because she's a chereshes and he's a cheresh. But he cannot marry his brother's wife because he can't do chalitza with her. And also there's a zika. He also can't do yibum with her because she is the wife of his sister rabbinically. So therefore she's stuck. Shnei Achem, let's say you have two brothers. Let's say you have two brothers. One's a cheresh and one's a pikeach. And let's say they're married to two women who are not related, and pikachos who are both of sound mind. Meis cheresh bal pikechas. Let's say the cheresh dies. Mayas pikech bal pikechas. So what can the pikech do? He can do either one. That's a regular case. Chalitz or miyabim. Do chalitz or yibam. Meis pikech bal pikechas. But let's say the pikech dies. Mayas cheresh bal pikechas. What could he do? The cheresh kones. He can do yibam. Veino motzia la'olam. But he's not allowed to ever divorce her because he can never get rid of the zika element of. His get cannot get rid of the zika of the first of the yavam he has with his brother's wife. The eno motzi la'olam through, so he can marry her, but he's never able to divorce her because this rabbinic get cannot uproot the biblical marriage which came from this biblical zika. But let's say you have shnei achim pikrin nesuin with shnei nachrios. Let's say you have two brothers of Samai who are married to two nachrios, achas pikachas, achas chareshes. One is of Samai and one is a chareshes. Meis pikach bal chareshes. Let's say the pikach dies. Maya se pikach bal pikachas. So what should the pikach who's married to pikachas do? Kones, he can marry her. V'mratzo hotzi yotzi. He can divorce her afterwards. Meis pikach bal pikachas. But let's say the pikach who's married to pikachas dies. Maya se pikach bal chareshes. He could do chalitz or yibam. And then we say, but let's say Shnei Achin Echad Cheresh Echad Pikech. Let's say you have two brothers, one's a Cheresh and one's a Pikech. There's two of them Shnei Nachros. They're married to two separate women. Achas Chereshes and Achas Pikechas, and they're not related. And one is a Chereshes, one's Pikechas. Meis Cheresh Bal Chereshes. So if the Cheresh dies, who's married to the Chereshes, Maya Sa Pikech Bal Pikechas. What does he do? The Pikech Kones. He can marry her. He can do Yibam and Ratzo Hotzi Yotzi. and he could divorce her because he's a pikach. But meis pikach bal pikachas. But let's say the pikach is married to pikachas too. Maya cheresh bal chereshes. Kones ve'eno motzi lo. He can do yibum, but he can't divorce her because he's not able to do a biblical divorce, and therefore he can't get rid of the biblical connection of yibum. Okay.